Nothing will crush a real estate investor's spirit like landlord stress. The difference between being successful and miserable in managing properties is education. Welcome to Landlord University, where landlords learn. Landlord University is recorded from inside the RentPrep office, where Stephen White and Jeff Pearson share the lessons learned from working with some of the most successful landlords.
Welcome to Landlord University Night School. I'm Jeff Pearson, and this is my co-host,
Stephen White.
Hello, Stephen. How are you this evening?
Hey, pretty good, Jeff. So the topic for this podcast episode that we're going to be doing, it ties really good into an episode that if you haven't heard it, I would definitely recommend going back and listening. It was an interview that we did with Mike Simmons from Just Start Real Estate, and we had done a live screening, right? A live tenant selection process, I guess you can call it. We did it on air. He ran 3 background checks and basically made his decision on who he was going to rent to based on the results that he received from RentPrep.
And that was a lot of fun. We went through it, and he had an expectation of who he thought he was going to choose. And by the time we were done, through a lot of thoughtful deliberation, he actually chose a different tenant. And
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if he did actually rent to them and how that's gone. We should follow up on that sometime.
For sure.
Let's talk about screening multiple tenants at the same time and not just one at a time.
Right.
And you were mentioning before we started recording the benefits of Mike having done the 3 together. So let's talk about that.
Well, you perfect point was that you mentioned that he went into it kind of thinking who he was going to go with, and at the end of it, at the end of our deliberation, he decided he went with someone totally different. And I think that had he just screened that one person, that one applicant that he was considering and that he thought was going to be the good choice, and you could even tell when you go back and listen to that recording, he was sort of making it fit. He was making it work. There were some things that he wasn't okay with, like the guy's income, but he was willing to make an exception or look past it because of something else. But once you compared that one applicant to 2 other applicants, that all of a sudden changes everything. You have something to compare to, and you're no longer trying to make it fit. Now you're really choosing the best fit out of the applicants that you have. And I think he mentioned he got 10 applications total, and he did 3 screenings. So the first 7 were eliminated before the screening process, the background check process, I should say. And that's really the right way to do it. I mean,
Yes.
You want to have a high number of applicants to increase your selection pool. You want to narrow it down to the top couple of choices or few choices, 3, 4, and then make your decision after you have the data, and the gut feeling has to be there because they made your final cut.
Right.
So, it should be, a combination of data and gut feeling. Never underestimate the power of gut feeling, but don't put too much stock into it, because I've heard too many landlords say, I went with my gut on this guy and it was the worst mistake ever, and that's why I'm screening tenants from now on.
Yeah, you have to balance the gut feeling against the data. And we've talked about a lot of different things, but one of the things about renting out a property, first of all, you need to market it well. And we did do an episode on marketing your property, but you want to market it well so you get as many applicants as possible. And hopefully you're getting high quality applicants. That way you do have 10 or 15 applications that you receive that you can work through to narrow it down to 3 or 4 that you really want to do a background check on. And whether you use a company like RentPrep or you do the background screening yourself, it's really important to have at least 3 to compare against each other, so that you can look to see what are the positive and negative aspects of each one. And again, going back to that episode that we did with Mike can really give you a sense of the different things that we thought about, because each of us had different thoughts and ideas about the information that we had received. Mike was the only one who had met these people and had interviewed them. But as we went through the data, we each brought up different things that he was able to think about. And anybody who is going through that process, again, whether you do it yourself or you use RentPrep or another company like that, you have the data, then you have to balance it against your gut feeling.
Definitely. And, a very common conversation that I have with landlords every single day is, they want sort of our take or our interpretation of the reports that they're looking at. And it's usually that first time landlord running a background check, first time, they get the results back. They're not really quite sure what to make of it. Some things cause a concern, but they don't know how concerning it should be. So they might see a judgment or a tax lien or something on there. And again, they're rationalizing it with us. So they'll be asking us, well, I see he was evicted. I just had this happen the other day. Matter of fact, I see he was evicted, but it was like 2 years ago. So, I should probably overlook that. I said, well, okay, so here's my take on that. First off, we know as a fact that if you are evicted once, you're more likely to be evicted again. You lose that fear of the unknown, and it's just people are susceptible to doing it again and again, and get sort of into that trap because they know that they can come out on the other side of it. So not only that, but I said, if you had somebody else in front of you right now, another screening report, let's just pretend that we had done two, and the other person didn't have an eviction, would this be a difficult decision for you? And the answer clearly was no. So that's why I said, well, you're trying to force it, you're trying to make it fit, you're trying to rationalize and make sense of it, and say, well, I really need a tenant right now, and 2 years ago, maybe they learned their lesson, hopefully. But if you're comparing it to someone else and the other person comes out clean as a whistle, and it just turns out to be a great tenant, I think then it's an obvious choice. And so you need to have that comparison. Without it, you're just stretching. You're trying to make it work.
Really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and especially like in Mike's case, again, Mike said that he knew the one was going to be a hard no because he didn't have a good gut feeling on them, and the data supported that. And
Yes.
so, a lot of times the data does support what you're thinking, but a lot of times it doesn't. I tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and people are very savvy and very sophisticated with their ability to skirt certain details or get around certain things or come across as though they're this fantastic tenant and they've got a great rental history, and turns out they've got their brother-in-law acting as a landlord, giving them a good reference. I mean, they've thought of it all. Trust me, they've been through the game before. And as a new landlord, you're fresh meat. You're somebody to take advantage of because you haven't gone through that likely. Like I said, a lot of times you'll learn by mistakes. So if you haven't made that mistake yet, somebody's going to be looking to make an example out of you.
Yes. So again, get at least 3, if not 4 prospective tenants that you can screen at the same time. Do a good interview with them, get the data, and if you need to, go back and interview your top prospects again to make that final comparison to help you make your final decision.
Yes, definitely. More the better. 10 is always the magic number. It doesn't mean you have to get 10 background checks. It just means you should be looking at 10 applications, and the top ones, your top prospects should be the ones you're running a background check and being able to compare data, line for line. How does this person compare to that person?
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. I look forward to talking to you again next evening.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to Landlord University, and remember to visit rentprep.com/landlordu to see show notes and access free resources like forms and guides. And be sure to check out Jeff Pearson hosting his own hit podcast at thementorimpact.com.